Hi, I'm Ed Marsh. Welcome to this episode of Signals from the OP. If you've seen Signals, you know that normally I talk about issues that I believe should be of strategic importance to manufacturers. And next week we're going to do that in depth. We're actually going to talk about strategy of strategy. So this week we're going a little bit lighter. We're going to talk about an issue that's primarily tactical, but I think has serious strategic implications. We're going to talk about the way reps fail to research and to learn. By reps, I mean sales reps. Roger Staubach said that it takes a lot of unspectacular preparation to produce spectacular results. And that, of course, is true about so many aspects of life, and certainly about B2B sales these days. There's two pieces of this. One is kind of the simple prep and research that ought to be bread and butter for many sales reps, and I find just often doesn't happen. There's data, and then there's analysis of the data. So looking at LinkedIn, looking at a prospect's or a customer's Twitter feed, looking at Facebook, not just for hobbies and the kind of stuff, like, oh, well, that's a cool golf thing you have on your wall sort of a thing, but for real insights into the way they look at things, once they're connected to, the kinds of things that they like and that they follow, etc. And even setting up Google alerts on a person, making sure that you're getting info on them and their company. May not be a lot of it, maybe there is, but certainly what's there would be relevant and something that proactive salespeople ought to be thinking about. But even more than that, I'd say digital body language. This is something that I talk about frequently and find a lot of blank stares. People tend to think of CRM as a contact manager. I speak of it as a way to bring some of the efficient process that companies work so hard to develop in the back end to the front end of the business, to make sales reps more efficient, more consistent, to eliminate the waste in their sales process, etc. But if you use the right tools, if you have the right tech stack for, to accompany the CRM, marketing automation and some of the other kinds of tools, then going into the CRM is more than seeing when did I last talk to them and refresh my memory about the notes. It's seeing their interactions with you that you don't even know about. Whether they've reopened an email that had been sitting in their inbox for a while, whether they've been back on your site, what pages they've been on your site, in what order and at what tempo or velocity are they re-engaging with you. All of those provide information that were you sitting across the table from somebody, you'd be able to infer through body language. But with our virtual relationships, digitally based with people now, we don't get that chance, except you do with digital body language. That's the kind of basic blocking and tackling, or bread and butter, depending on what analogy you want to use, sort of activity that sales reps ought to embrace, ought to love, ought to search for opportunities for, and instead, in many cases, they just piss and moan about having to use CRM and Big Brother watching them and this and that. Somehow there's a disconnect. Then there's kind of another level of it. It's walking the talk. Do they sell and market themselves? I mean, seriously, I don't think I'd hire a sales rep that didn't have at least 500 LinkedIn connections. You don't know how many they have after that, but I mean, geez, that's a pretty easy number to accomplish these days. Do they have a blog? Do they write anywhere, maybe on Medium if it's not their own blog, but someplace that they kind of stake out some intellectual territory around something that's of importance to them? Maybe it's not about business, maybe it's not about sales, but maybe there should be something about which they're passionate that they actually exercise some intellectual rigor around, because that's what you're asking them to do on your behalf. So you got to see that they can model that in an area that's important to them, selling themselves. So what's their digital footprint like? How many social media platforms do they use? Do they post on them? Do they curate information? Do they share things from other people? The kind of stuff that's important to selling in a digital age. They say they're a resource, but are they really? Do they understand business finance? Have they done anything to understand business accounting so that they can at least be conversant in their sales process? How many books do they read a year? How many books do they read a month? I believe very strongly that if you're not an active reader, you can't possibly expose yourself to the breadth of ideas that are important in order to be a successful salesperson these days. What's their opinion on industrial trends like 3D printing and Internet of Things? How about product as a service? Do they even know what these things are? Can they converse about them? Do they have any sort of data or facts or articles that they've read that they can refer to in that conversation? Do those things necessarily make them a good candidate? Hardly. Obviously, there have to be a lot of other attributes. However, I would say that the absence of those makes them a poor candidate. And yet, I routinely hear about companies that are hiring reps for industry experience. Oh, well, they're going to bring contacts with them, they're going to bring accounts with them, they're going to bring leads with them. Doesn't happen. You know what Einstein said about doing the same things and expecting different results, right? So hiring the right reps is about finding people with a growth mindset. If you're not familiar with growth versus fixed mindset, absolutely research it. I'll put a link in the transcript to this. I think it's hugely powerful and fundamental to finding the right people for your business in a very dynamic and disruptive kind of a world. They need to be able to optimize themselves and think about it deliberately. Even if they don't have a formal tool set in marketing, you can just see whether they manifest those behaviors, because those are going to be important in the way they interact with buyers. So again, I promised this is a tactical issue that has strategic implications. The way you staff and build your sales force across the continuum of your revenue growth function will absolutely determine your ability to deliver consistent, profitable, predictable, scalable manufacturing revenue growth. That makes it strategic. If you like this kind of counterintuitive or kind of poke a finger in the eye of common sense sort of a perspective on industrial revenue growth, by all means, I'd love to have you join me in the future. You can subscribe to be informed about more posts at signalsfromtheop.com. Signalsfromtheop.com. I'm Ed Marsh. Thanks very much for joining me.